Okay, welcome to our latest live interview. This is my 22nd interview since we started 11 weeks ago. And I'm hoping that we're not going to have any technical problems. For those that were watching on Tuesday, it was a real shame. I was about 20 minutes in with Nikki Spinks and we just lost the connection, and I could hear her, but she couldn't hear me, and it was a bit of a mess. Anyway, I'm hoping tonight's going to be fine. It's looking good so far, James. So we've got James Elson, and James is someone that I've met, I think, when he came up last year to the West Hallam Way, but we've not really chatted much. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better, James. And thank you so much for giving up this hour or so and chatting to us. And if you're watching live, then feel free to ask some questions, leave some comments, and then we'll bring those on and we'll ask James as we go along. But maybe just to start with, James, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what life is like for you in this lockdown period.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride. My main job, if you want to call it that, is organising events, ultras down in the southeast of the UK. And we were scheduled to have our first race of the season, the South Downs Way 50, on April the 4th. So, 2.5 weeks before that, we were thinking, what measures are we going to have to put in place to have the race safely? And a few days after that, we went into lockdown. And the busiest part of our season is April, May, June. So we've cancelled or postponed now 6 events. And it's been pretty painful, to be honest, just keeping runners up to date with what's happening, dealing with landlords, trying to rearrange things, dealing with the contractors, trying to offset some of the financial blow that happens when you cancel races so late in the day. And obviously, well, not obviously, but we have other areas to the Centurion business. Centurion's the company that I run. And we have the coaching and the store side of things, and they were obviously affected too. So it's been just kind of working out what we can do, trying to be creative, keep runners informed, up to date. And it's been a challenge, but I really think that the community has come through even stronger than it was before this all happened, the running community, and specifically our Centurion community as well. And we actually had our first ever virtual event last week. Like, if you told me at the beginning of the year we would be organising a virtual race, I would never have believed you. But there's a time and a place, and the situation just led us to think it was worth exploring. And we ended up with 20 shy of 4,000 runners taking part, which was just so much bigger than I'd ever anticipated. Everybody from 1 to 86, all over the globe, just was exactly what we needed, really, all of us. So we had this focus and this, cohesion and this support and positivity. Of course, now we've got to get 4,000 awards out in the post, which is a bit, like, one of our staff, Nikki, is dealing with most of that, thankfully. And in terms of, personally, we've got 2 young kids, so obviously we've been trying to homeschool them at the same time. So it's been a challenge, but just this week, the kids have gone back to school. They're in nursery and year 1 here in England, so they've both gone back. And we're trying to look forward and just, be optimistic, but keep doing what we're doing, really. But it has been a roller coaster, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've just put a photo that you sent me of your 2 with the numbers 3 and 5. So were they part of the virtual race as well? Were they?
Yeah, so they entered so you could enter anywhere between 5K and 100 miles, and you had a week to run.
Okay.
And the kids entered the 5K, and they did a mile each over a few days. Georgia, the youngest one, she's 3. She did not really engage with it that well. She'd rather have been on a bike. Louis is actually 6, and he loved it, and he's done a few running races. So, it was good to see them out and doing something anyway that wasn't just bike or scoot for a change. But yeah.
Yeah. And then I've got another photo as well of your son on his bike. Or is that your daughter?
That's Louis. Yeah, So Georgia learned to ride her bike during lockdown, so another bonus of the occasion. But Louis is getting far more adventurous on his bike, and I won't tell you what I've done to his front brake so that he can do skids and stuff, but he's really getting into it. So we've gone on some longer kind of rides together where George is still on the balance bike, just coming to pedals. So it gives us a bit more freedom, yeah.
Right. And is that from home? Can you get to that field from where you live?
Yeah, so we live about, best way to describe it, it's just 20 minutes north of St Albans is probably the nearest bigger town. And we've got kind of just a little like housing estate kind of area and then fields all around us. So we're lucky. We've got a lot of trails out of the front door, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. And then the third picture I've got of your family is one with someone on your shoulders. Is that your son?
Oh, that's Georgia. Yeah, sorry, that's Georgia. That's not actually from lockdown. I forgot about that. That was from, we have a 1 mile race at the start of our South Downs Way 100. It's a 1 mile kids race that happens on the Friday night before the 100. And we usually get 20 or 30 kids show up. And that was Georgia's first attempt. She gave up and she needed to do it on my shoulders. So that was us finishing the kids' mile. Albeit somewhat illegally,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, James, we've got a few people watching, so that's great. And if anyone has got a question they'd like to put on, if someone could just put a comment on, actually, just to make sure I know that they're coming, that would be great. And then we can ask those. And I've got a few photos that you've sent me about some of the races that you've done. I'd love to find out more about the Centurion races. I must admit, James, it's on my bucket list. I've not ventured that far down south yet, but I've got lots of good friends like Marco and Debbie Consani who've done your races. And lots of others, and it's definitely on my list to come down. I'm really looking forward to getting down one day, and I'll get your advice on maybe a good one to start with.
We've had a good number of Scottish contingent over the years, and it does seem to be increasing. But of course, for you guys, you can probably get to the Alps in about the same time. So I don't blame you, John.
No, well, I suppose I started with the West Highland Way. That was my local race. That's just half an hour away from where I live. And then when the Hardmoors races and then the Lakeland, they're great races that are close by. But it's not that I'll definitely be down. I definitely want to come down and do some. We have got a few people watching. So Malcolm Cochrane says evening all, and Richard Stillian says hello. So we have got a few people watching. That's great. I think one of the things I looked at, James, I've got it in front of me on my iPad. The DUV statistics, and I was going to sort of copy them out, but there's just so many so many races you've done. There's 66 events that are just on that, and I'm sure there's lots of others as well, and there's loads of things on there. So I'd love to find out, maybe do this interview in two parts. One is to think about your own running, and then the second part maybe to think about the organising and sort of how you got into that. And then within your running, there seems to be sort of three different things. You've got the traditional trail races like the West Highland Way and Arc of Attrition, all these ones. You've also got 24-hour races. And then you've also got lots of adventures, haven't you, where you've done, you've gone away and you've not a race particularly, but you've done long distance on things. Just give us a little sense of what got you into running and ultra running in particular.
Yeah, sure. A friend signed me up for the Marathon des Sables back in 2005, it was. He'd seen a Ben Fogle programme on TV. And we were, a few years out of university and a bit overweight and drinking a bit too much, living in London. And you could just sign up then, and it was probably a fraction of the price that it is today. And we went for it, and it combined the things I love, adventure and challenge and all that. And but we came back, and that was it. I was retired, but then the bug had definitely bitten, and I was busy, searching around and reading more. And then the Race in the Planet's 4 Desert series cropped up. It was the same format, but obviously opportunities to travel to new locations. And I was working as a sales executive in London at the time. I didn't really have any other outgoings, so I just spent all my money on traveling around the world and doing these adventures. So that was great. But then once I came towards the end of that, I got sort of more into the longer single stage stuff. So the 100-mile distance had really captured my imagination, but more so Badwater. And at the time, to qualify for Badwater, you needed to run 200-mile non-stop races so that you could actually apply. And back then, there was only really a few British athletes sort of interested in that kind of thing. There was Mark Cobain, Mimi Anderson, and James Adams. We were the ones sort of going and doing the longer road racing abroad. And so James Adams and I managed to get picked after both doing a couple of longer races, and we went out in 2010 and did that race. And then that's where I started to cross over with Centurion, because I realised that we didn't have that many events here other than the ones you've mentioned, actually. Hardmoors, Lakeland, West Island Way. Hardmoors was just beginning. Lakeland had just started. That were marked or, single stage 100-mile races. So I decided to try and put a race on here. That was the North Downs Way 100. And then Centurion grew from that. In terms of my running journey, I continued doing things pretty haphazardly, to be honest. I just had a bucket list and I wanted to just do all the big ones. So Western States and Leadville and Spartathlon, Grand Union, all of the, what I would call marquee races. And then I sort of discovered the 24-hour scene and wanted to give that a go, and had sort of 5 or 6 awful ones, 2 or 3 not bad ones, and then a couple more awful ones. So it's a pretty dreadful career in 24-hour racing, but it's such an enigma of a racing format. It's such a cruel beast. Yeah. But so for now, 24 is off the table. But the longest single stage trail racing is definitely where it's at for me, and stuff that's in the mountains. Stuff that won't be on there, like a Bob Graham. I visited Barclay last year and had a go at that. And I'm more interested now in doing some of the more mountainous stuff. But single stage is definitely my preference, if I've got a preference, yeah. Yeah.
I've got a photo that you sent me at one of the 24-hour races. I think you're getting a water from Robbie Britton on this one.
That's right, yeah.
So was that one of your good ones?
It was probably the best one for about 16 hours. That was my second GB vest out in Timișoara in Romania a few years ago, and I really honestly was having the race of my life, and I could feel the excitement. James Stewart was also racing there, and he's probably familiar to a lot of the Scottish runners, and it's a good friend of mine, and his race had gone badly and I'd come past him. And we were really trying to help each other out. And then my race tanked and he came past me. And in the end, I just disappeared and blew up. And he went on to a fantastic resurgence. And as a team, we did actually win silver medal. But yeah, that was 16 of the best hours and then 8 of the worst hours of my running career. And that's what 24-hour racing is, right?
Yeah. I've just put the photo. I know that's the time, but there's a photo with you and James.
That's last year. Yeah.
Was that the same event?
No, that was from the start of the West Island Way race last year. So you got the pylon jersey on. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
I must admit, James, I find it fascinating people like yourself who do both the 24-hour round a track or round a 1 kilometre loop, as well as the mountain stuff. And because I must confess, the 24-hour round a flat track just doesn't appeal to me. I just love to be in the mountains. But I just find it fascinating people like yourself who are prepared to do both, because they're quite different disciplines, aren't they?
They are different disciplines. And I guess I had not success, but I've run a lot of marathons in my lifetime. Probably into the quite high hundreds.
Oh, right, okay.
And I really had the bug for running road marathons in kind of 10 years ago now. But I think that kind of desire to find a groove and stick with it and aim for a target that's very different from just completing a journey is something that I've carried through into the longer distance stuff. So I've always liked the idea that there's a benchmark out there with the 24-hour. Like it's one of the only relatable formats we've got where you can sort of say, I did this and I was able to achieve that against, another performance somewhere else. So I like that challenge that I'm trying to kind of compete with something that's comparable. Whereas, as you and I know, like a hot West Island Way race might be completely different to the snow and the rain, I don't know, whatever else another year. And I love that too. So I think they are different mental focuses, though. I do like the rhythm and the groove that you can get in on a lapped race, especially if it's a long one. You don't ever have to push, so it's just more of it's almost like a meditation. Whereas the longer single stage stuff, you've really got to focus, I think, a lot of the time to stay on top of self-sufficiency and hydration, nutrition, and those other challenges. So to me, they're kind of they're very different. If you had to ask me which I enjoyed, it would definitely be the trail stuff for sure. But I do like the challenge, I think, of the lapped format. Yeah.
Yeah. I just put a photo as well from the West Highland Way race last year. You finished in 18 hours, 12 minutes and 17 seconds for 9th place.
Yeah.
Was that a race that you were happy with looking back? Was it a good performance?
John, I don't want to say that I didn't train much last year and be that guy. But I was. If you look at my Strava coming into that race, I had probably one of the best running crews in the business, Drew Sheffield and Debbie Kansani crewing for me.
Yeah.
And I think they both felt that I had probably undercooked the training a little bit coming in. I was just hoping. I'd actually DNF'd that race in 2012. I stopped at Rowadennan. With the sickness, I was really unwell in the car park, and Drew was crewing me then as well. I really just wanted to be able to finish what I consider to be one of the top few classic, British long distance challenges. I just wanted to see the second half of the route because I've done the fling before, and enjoy the day. And I got everything out of it that I wanted. I think I was quite a long way back at Drimmen and Balmahar, and then I made good progress during the middle third of the race, but then it got hot at Kinlochleven, and I did struggle the last 15 or 20 miles or so, but that happens, right? I absolutely loved it though. It was such a brilliant experience.
Would you be back, do you think? Is it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the classics like Lakeland, for me, classics like Lakeland and West Highland Way, the classic longest single-stage British races are things that I think I will always look to return to one day. Yeah. I think I can go better than that on the West Highland Way as well. I think if I really focused and worked at it, I could, and knowing now a little bit more about what's to come in the second half, it's very different, that second half.
Yeah. And a bit of training maybe as well.
Yeah, that would probably help.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously our race has been cancelled this year as well. It should be in a few weeks, but we've are also doing a virtual race. It's slightly different to yours. We've given people 9.5 days to do the 95 miles in 3 legs to try and break it up a bit. But it's just the time that they spend running, so it's not the cumulative time overall. So I think it's slightly different. But we've got 500 signed up for the solo, and then another 250 in teams. So we're really pleased as well. It's going to be really fun. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Yeah, you'll see my name on the list.
Yes, I did.
Put myself down for that as soon as I saw it come up. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, we've got some questions coming in, James, and thank you very much for those that are watching live, and feel free to ask them. So a slight change of track on this one. This is from Michael Jones, who organises the Ultra Trail of Snowdonia, and he was a guest a few weeks ago. So he says, "Hi James, thanks for all your help and advice about race organisation over the past few years." He wants to know, he wonders how your business developed during its first few years and what made you want to do it. So that would be really good lead in, just to chat a little bit about your Centurion races and how that's developed.
It's a really good question. I think the thing I remember is the landscape being quite different back then. I'm talking about it like it's 50 years ago. It's like a decade, right? But a lot has changed in that time. When we put the North Downs Way 100 on, there wasn't another marked point-to-point 100-mile race in the UK. The only marked 100-mile race in the UK was Caesar's Camp, which was 10-mile loops, and doesn't exist anymore. It was just a very different, specific type of race. So, that gap was there. And because I'd been to the US and done their Grand Slam, I sort of saw the foundations beginning. Jen Jackson, who organised the South Downs Way 100, contacted me and said that she didn't want to continue organising the event. Was I interested? So a second one kind of fell into our lap, if you like. And then the Thames Path is something I'd had in the back of my mind. So all of a sudden I had 300s, and then the fourth one kind of just came out from that kind of cross shape that the autumn 100 as it is now, coming back to that central point. So it went very quickly from 100 to 6 races in a year, because we had the shorter 50 versions of the North and the South Downs. And 10 years later,
are they on the same day, the 50s?
The North Downs Way 50 used to be. The South Downs Way 50 has always been separate, but now they're both separate. Right. So there are the 400s, those 250s, and then about 4 or 5 years ago we added 2 other 50s. So that, together with then we've had the track 100 and then the piece of string fun run and then a 50k last year. So there's been a few other kind of side projects along the way, but that core of 400s has always been there. So I think to date we're on about 35-ish hundreds organised, and each one takes us a tiny piece of my soul away from me. It's just so knackering, but in a completely positively brilliant way. Yeah. But yeah, coming back to Mike's question, I think we were lucky in a way that the timing was there, and instantly what we did as a format captivated people's imagination. The Southeast as well, there are some wonderful trails. It's so different to the mountains. What Mike's got up there in Snowdonia is truly, world-class mountainous terrain. It's a different type of challenge, but it is more accessible to those who live down this way. There's a bigger population centre. There's more people coming through willing to try those kind of events. So we've always been lucky to be well supported. We try to treat every runner the same from first to last, and we try always to make sure that the newbies are getting as much help as the ones that are coming back for their 25th time. And I think that's the core thing, really. We always try to be open and transparent and communicate well, and that's probably been the core of our business model throughout, and it's the same now. And the most important thing, as you know, John, is the community. That's really what it's about. That's where your volunteer group comes from. And they're the ones that make the race what it is. And I know Mike's got his Apex running community up there and has done really great work to build that. So, I think there's room for everybody. We often get asked, why aren't we organising races in the mountains? There's plenty of decent organisers out there doing things in the other areas of the UK. I just don't think we need to go, stepping on each other's toes. I think there's a good network out there. So, yeah, long may that continue for sure. Has
it surprised you how quickly it did grow then and become as many races as you've got?
It did. Yeah, it did. I didn't know when we set that first one up if it would be super popular or not, but it was. And then it was the Thames Path, that first Thames Path, that sold out so fast. It was all of a sudden, it's like, wow, there's this demand here that there's nothing to fill. No other races to fill with this demand. So people were going abroad to do it, and that's expensive and time consuming and not really that sustainable. So yeah, I was surprised, but I've been more surprised at how many ultras have come in, say, the last 3 or 4 years of all distances. But then the market for running has grown in general. So I suppose it's natural that people always look for that next thing. And if it's not faster, it might be longer. And therefore, I don't know how long it's sustainable for. I know we've seen a few come and go. And I think, unfortunately, the last couple of months will affect the long-term, sustainability of some of the races out there. But, there's still so much going on now. It is kind of shocking. The last few years, it's just seemed to go crazy. Like, I can't keep up with it anymore. Yeah. I have no idea about half the races there are on the circuit. Whereas beforehand, 10 years ago, I could have named you every single one,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. I think when I started, 2007 was my first West Hallam Way. And in Scotland at that stage, there was maybe 4, 5 ultra races. And now there's probably over 40. There's races pop up. Someone, friends say, I'm doing this race. I didn't even realise it was on, and then that's replicated across the whole country, isn't it? Which is great. It's great for runners. It's great that there's a choice there. On these interviews, I've interviewed a number of race organisers, Shane Hawley and Mark Laithwaite, Michael, John and Shirley Steele, and it's fascinating because I think most of them are the same story as yours. You know that they started off, they wondered how it would go, and it's just grown and grown. And there's probably been some failures along the way as well, but. I think as a runner, I think it's just brilliant. The choices we have now because of people like you who are prepared to put these on. So, and I think you can. I think you can tell as well the ones that are put on by runners like yourself and like the people I've mentioned, because you're keen to put a race on that you would like to do, aren't you? I think, and I really think that makes the difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, John. I think. If you can talk to people on a level and you can empathise with their experience and you know what they're likely to want at those different stages along the way, just simple things like how when you're a runner and you go on a website and you want to know some basic stuff about an event and you can't find it, that sort of frustration.
Yeah.
The runner cuts through that stuff. The runner who becomes an organiser cuts straight through that stuff. I do also think it is good that there are lots of people willing to come through and try it, because I personally feel like the longevity of being a race organiser is highly questionable. Like, you need a good team around you. And this harks back a little bit to what Mike was saying. In the early years, it was just me, and it was horrendous, like horrendous. Nowadays, I've got a great team with me, and it's only because of them that we can do as much as we do. But it does take its toll. It is extremely tiring, stressful. So I think the more that are willing to come through and give it a go and stick with it, the better, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I must admit, I look after the West Highland Way Race website, and I look at yours, and I just think it's so good. I think when your races are on, I love going on, and if I've got friends doing one of your races, then you can see where they are. And, just the way you lay it out, it's really friendly to be able to follow. As someone who's not doing the race but just following it, it's great.
Yeah, thanks. I've been a massive follower of ultras all over the world. Sit up and watch Western States on the old silly where the dot thing was before the dot was even really a thing. We're actually going to be working with James Thurlow next year at Open Tracking, because I think actually tracking the runners in real time is something now that we need to be bringing to, because it's out there and it's such a good format. Aesthetically, it's so good. I really rate what James has done.
Yeah. I had James,
he and Chris Mills.
I had James on as a guest a few weeks ago. So
did you?
Yeah, it was great because I've got to know James fairly well on some of the races I've done. And it really adds to the whole experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows we're working with them for next year, by the way, but now everyone knows. I think Chris Mills does our timing at the moment and built our website, and he's really good as a runner himself. He's good at also seeing what I do. What do the runners need to see? Yeah. And then that integration with James is coming via Chris, and I'm really hopeful the display next year is even better than the one we've got at the moment. But I'm highly critical of everything we do. Like, nothing's ever good enough. Okay. I've always got to try and go a bit further. Yeah. So I appreciate it that you think it is good to see. So that's good.
Yeah. Okay, we've got some more questions. Mike Raffan, he wants to know what is your favourite hard race? The one that challenges you and, more importantly, you enjoyed. So looking back on all the things you've done, is there a favourite, particularly hard one?
Oh, that is such a good question. The one that gave me the greatest satisfaction on finishing, I would say, was Spartathlon. Oh, right, okay. Probably because I failed the first time and I knew I could have finished. I messed up my timings. I waited for a runner I'd been with for 75 miles and should have just gone on and done my own thing. And that really, for a year then, I focused on nothing but the completion of that race. And to make that journey, I think is just one of the highlights of any runner's career, if you can get there. It meant so much to me, for sure. That was the one that probably, if you took all my other finishes away from me, that would probably be the one I'd hang on to, I guess. Probably the hardest race I ever did, and I discussed this with Dan Lawson on our podcast a few weeks ago, was Badwater. That beat me up just so bad. It was just so excruciating on every level. I think that was purely mental desire by the end. That was total physical. But the best race I've ever been to, I would say, in terms of organisation, feeling, camaraderie, all of that stuff, would probably be Western States on a kind of overall race experience level. I love the car boot style thing or no support thing of Barclay. I absolutely love the small race field but classic big race feel of something like West Highland Way race. But if you combine all those little things together, Western States isn't a big field. It is the most incredible course. It's got a bit of everything. You get such a swell of volunteers supporting the race. It's just got this general sort of feel around it that sort of elevates it above. But I could go on for ages about, maybe that's a handful there,
No, it's lovely. And I think just from what you're saying there, there's a variety of things there, and that's come across very clearly tonight. You know, that you're not a one trick, are you? You love to do a bit of everything. Okay, you might have favourites, but you've put your hand in and had a go at all sorts. And that's
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that answered Mike's question. Question from Rob Wood. He says, what was your first ultra and were you hooked on ultra distance straight away? Now, you've answered that a little bit, but maybe Rob missed that at the beginning.
Well, my first actual ultra was actually called Tring to Town, which was a 45-mile race from Tring to Little Venice, which is replicating the last 45 miles of the Grand Union Canal race. And I had a full desert pack on with tuna pasta packed in the front pack and the whole works. And it took us 10 and a half hours. And that is a race that similarly kind of exists now as country to capital. And I've run in less than half of that time. I would say that, no, I wasn't hooked at all at the beginning. I loved the sense of achievement of it. I did it with a friend of mine. We spent the rest of the weekend just laying around in my flat in West Hampstead eating pizza and congratulating each other. But no, the pain of it was, you make a lot of mistakes, and I definitely wasn't hooked. And like I say, I took a year off after the MDS, so it did take a while for it to bite properly, I think.
Yeah. At what point, James, did you realise that you were quite good at this? You know, presumably when you started, you weren't winning races, but at what point did you realise you could do quite well?
I think that probably happened. I raced a marathon called Three Forts on the South Downs Way in 2010, and it was or 9, I forget, but it was really, really bad weather. And I don't know why, because I had no business doing it, but the race started and I just went for it. And I'd done the race before, so I knew the course, and it starts on a climb. Actually, it starts the same way as our South Downs Way 50 does now for the first mile. And I turned around at the top of that first hill, and nobody was that close, and I just went for it. And I didn't look back, and I won the race, and I could not believe it. Like, it was so way off what I thought I could achieve. And even now, I look back at the time I ran there, and it was way in excess of what I'd been doing on the road. And it just gave me this confidence that I could push and I could challenge. I'd had a little feeling of that at the Four Deserts races because the fields there aren't very competitive, and I had finished in the top 2 or 3 a couple of times at those events, or at least the top 5, and raced against the great Dean Carnazes and managed to pit him at one of them. So I kind of knew that I was starting to get it right in general. But the first longer race that I won, proper race I would call it, was Grand Union, and that again was just leading from the front from quite a long way out and hanging on. And I said this again not that long ago. If I manage to get the lead in something, I tend to do okay. It's like sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. But the last few years I haven't been as competitive, and I've definitely had to change my racing style for that and accept that I'm going to be the type of runner who's a long way back at the start and maybe finishes stronger than necessarily goes off the front, because I just don't kind of have that second level at the moment. Whether that'll ever come back, I don't know, but we'll see.
I think, again, I'm sure, both of us have seen that over the last 5 years, particularly, haven't we? The style of running, your Jim Wormsleys now, who, just go at it from the start, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, and they set off as if it's a 10K race or a half marathon, and then they just hold on. Whereas, you know, traditionally it was always you're far better starting, you know, the race doesn't start till halfway and all this sort of stuff. But these top guys, they've turned it on its head, really, haven't they?
They have, and I love to see that, because I know the guts and determination it takes to go out there and just go for it. And it becomes kind of a time trial. They have taken it to a totally different level. And when I speak about being competitive, the times I was running for these races wouldn't get anywhere near the front now. But you got a race who's in the race, right? And they're helping to push each other, these guys, to these new heights. It's so good to watch. It's really great.
Yeah. Good, thank you. We got a great question from Martin Webb. It says, "Evening, James. Are you gutted the Barclay this year seemed to be perfect conditions for a finisher? Do you think you might have been able to complete it?"
Well, I wasn't going to Barclay this year, so probably not. Do I think I can finish Barclay? I will say yes, because I honestly do. I watched the video on Netflix where my good friend Wouter Hammerlink stands up and he says, he's asked if he can finish Barclay. He says, well, if you don't believe it, you shouldn't come. Yeah. If you don't hope for that, then don't come here. Yeah. And I kind of get that. It's like, if you don't think you can do it, then you're never, ever going to achieve it there. Mm-hmm. I think with the right skill sets, an athlete of moderate ability stands a chance of finishing. But I have to say, as it gets harder each time someone finishes, what I saw, for example, John Kelly doing a couple of years ago, and seeing the course for myself, I do have to wonder whether anybody can finish, let alone me. Someone will, they always do. The bar always gets raised. But, I would be delighted to go to Barclay and finish a fun run. That would be a dream come true for me. Yeah.
Have you got plans to try and get back?
Yeah, for sure. I'll keep trying as long as I'm allowed to keep trying. Yeah. And one day, you never know. Yeah. It's totally down to one man. So, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, we'll look forward to following your progress when you get back there. That'd be great. Mike Churchyard, who's I know he's done a number of your races, says, "Hi, James and John. Super John with CROC. What does that stand for?" CROC.
That's the Centurion Running One community virtual race.
Right, okay. So he said he loved that. Thank you very much. He says, which is your favourite Centurion race from your race director view? And which is your favourite as a runner? It's like having a favourite child, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. I can tell you what my least favourite... No, my favourite race, my favourite event, the one I would keep no matter what, for as long as I can, is the South Downs Way 100. That, to me, is the best of what we do. As a runner, I would probably say the same. Like I've only run one of our courses before as a runner. I competed in one of our events. It was a long time ago now, but I ran the Autumn 100. But if I could choose one to run myself, it would definitely be the South Downs Way 100. From an organisation point of view, Chiltern Wonderland is just a dream, because it's a great 50-mile loop, but the checkpoints are all pretty close to one another. We have a nice small field. They start where they finish. So logistically, it's simple, and it's second week in September. Usually the weather's pretty much spot on, and it's beautiful countryside. So that's always a great day for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so if you were recommended one for me to come down from Scotland to do, it would be the South Downs 100, would it?
100%, John. Okay. 100%.
Right. Yeah. I've written that down, so that'll go on my bucket list of ones to do. Tim Taylor says, enjoying this. Thanks, John and James. That's good. And John McLeod says, what is your top tip for running your best ultra, assuming training has all gone to plan and you're race ready? So what top tip would you give to somebody?
Slow down at the start.
Yeah.
If I had a penny for every person in a start field I see who starts too quickly, I would have almost as many pennies as runners. I think, we've watched dozens of these things. Obviously, I've crewed, paced, and run even more myself, and nothing affects your race performance, especially late on, like pacing well at the start. If you can just be patient and run your own race, Guy, it really comes back later on. The pacing, obviously, we talk about the circle of death, where the pacing leads to bad nutrition, leads to higher core temperature, leads to more bad nutrition, GI issues, and so on. It descends from there. But if you distill it back to where does it really start, is with poor pacing early on. That for sure is the one thing to concentrate on.
Yeah. The circle of death. I've not heard that. That's
yeah. We do an ultra workshop, and I draw this circle of death and say start.
Yeah.
But it always comes back to this.
Yeah. Well, I must have. I've done over 50 ultras now, and I would agree with that completely. My best ones have always been where I've set off more comfortably and I've worked my way through the field. And I'm slowed down less than others, and it's a lot more enjoyable as well, isn't it? If you're if in the last 10, 15 miles you're able to catch people, psychologically it does you a lot of good, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the longer the race, the more that rings true as well. Patience in those longer races is such a virtue for sure. Yeah.
You were saying before, James, that you enjoy the single long stage races. Have you done any stage races? I did the Dragon's Back last year, which I loved. It was 5 stages. Have you done a race like that where you can't? I know you've done Marathon des Sables, but are they some of your favourites as well?
That used to be all I did, was the stage races. So I did 5 desert races, and then I did a few stage races here in the UK. There used to be things like, in fact, some of them do still exist, like the Jurassic Coast Challenge and the XNRG events, the Pilgrims and the Druids and things like that. I loved those so much. I think multi-stage in recent years, the only thing I would say is similar to that for me has been running across Iceland with Robbie Britton, where we spent 7 days covering, I can't remember how many kilometres, it was a couple of 100 miles anyway, and I absolutely loved it. What I don't enjoy about stage racing is that first 5 or 10K the next day. I never ever found that easy. I don't know why, I never stood on that start line and thought, come on, let's get it today. It was always, oh, God, I'm going to have to slog this out. And eventually it clicks in and you find it. But, top of my bucket list for the future would be Tour de Jean, Dragon's Back's definitely on there, the PTL, those kind of events that are longer, mountainous, multi-stage for sure. I know strictly PTL, TDG, single stage, but some kind of break somewhere for food and or sleep is going to be obviously part of the journey. So slightly kind of different to the single stage, no sleep efforts, as it were.
Yeah. All right. That's really interesting to hear. We've come to the end of the questions from the audience, but if anyone else has got a question, then feel free. I've got a few questions I want to finish with, but I've got one more photograph I'd like to just have a chat about as well. And this is one of in Egypt. There's a pyramid behind you. So maybe just tell us a little bit about the story behind this one, please.
Yeah, that was the end of my 4 deserts journey. So it was meaningless and still is now, but I was the youngest person to complete the 4 deserts. What that really meant was the idiot who spent the most money traveling around the world. But nevertheless, for 3 years, it was this ambition, this goal that, you've got to stay fit and healthy and get to the start lines and put the logistics in place, and to actually sort of realize that dream was amazing. But unfortunately, the final stage, which is supposed to be like a 10K loop around the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything, there ended up being some terrorist incident, and we ended up walking literally 1K from just outside the Pizza Hut opposite the Sphinx to where you see that photo taken. It was the most or anticlimactic finish that you could ever have experienced. So that was it. That was what it was about.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a shame, isn't it? When I think you have a dream, don't you, of how it's going to finish, and then if it doesn't quite match that, then it's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you got any more races that you're hoping to do yourself this year? Obviously, I would imagine some of your races are being cancelled like the rest. Have you got anything in the horizon?
Yeah, I was supposed to be running UTMB
Oh, right.
I had an entry for Glencoe Skyline, which I was really excited about because I've not done anything on that scale in Scotland, certainly. And I have an entry for a 48-hour track race just because it's so similar to those first two. I don't think any of them are either happening or will happen for me this year. So I think instead I'll probably try and run a Paddy Buckley round this year, probably with my friend Drew, who works with me at Centurion. And I think you know Drew, John. He's done loads of racing up there.
Yeah.
But I'm quite happy not racing. I think 5-6 years ago I would have really missed it. Whereas now, if you tell me I'm not racing for the rest of the year, that's not really a bother to me. A journey like the Paddy Buckley is more than enough. I was lucky enough to race the Arc of Attrition in January as well, so I've had a chance to. I've got this fixation about I must run at least 100 miler every year, and I've been going since 2009. So I want to keep. And luckily, I've got that tick from January, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. This year for me, because our season now is all in the second half of the year, if we're lucky enough to get it away as well, the chance to race again is probably not going to be there. So I'll look forward to some racing myself, winter 2021 probably.
Yeah. We've got a question from Keith Godden. He says, "Hi James, thanks for everything you are doing for the ultra running. Thumbs up. Might we see you back on the canal path one day?"
I'm going to go ahead and say no to that. Like I said in one breath earlier in the call, the West Island Way and Lakeland, like I can definitely see myself back at both those. The Grand Union for me, partly because of how it went, partly because I did manage to scrape a win, and partly because of just the relentless nature of it, that was a one-time deal. That's one of the few races when it comes around each year, that is one of the most incredible races out there, and you should definitely do, but that I have no desire to go and do again. So I'll say no to that one.
Okay. We've got a question from Ian Moran. He says, "In your prime, could you beat Dan Lawson?"
My God, no. No way. Not the only time I could maybe beat Dan is if it was like 30 to 50 miles, really rough ground. If there's descending in there, no problem. I'll clean up. But if there's any climbing or distance or suffering involved, Dan would run rings around me. You know, almost everything. It would have to be a very specific race for me to have a chance. Yeah.
I must admit, I always enjoy your podcast that you do together, because there's obviously a good banter going on between you and some of the things that you bring across. Yeah. Well,
it's just for fun, but it's good fun. Yeah.
Well, if anyone else has got a question, there's still time, so bring those on. But over these last 22 interviews, I've been asking the same 5 questions to finish with. And so I'd like to ask those because I find it fascinating, because there's no obviously right or wrong answers to these, but it just gives a real sense of some of the issues. I think someone like yourself, who's done so many races, and as you've seen so many competitors in your races, then I'm sure there's some good things hopefully coming up on these. So the first question is, what's the best piece of advice that you've been given? You can have more than one if you want. Yeah.
I'm not very good at taking advice, John. So I think about this carefully. I think it's not necessarily advice, but the quote, the phrase that I always, it's so cliche, but I always say to myself is that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, which is a Wayne Gretzky quote, Canadian ice hockey player. Right. But I really do believe that. Like, I have failed at a lot of events, but I'm just as proud of having given it a go. You learn from those mistakes and then you try again. Yeah. And that's true of everything, I think. And I really encourage runners to just try to have a go. And I think, that probably advice-wise, maybe not from someone I know, but definitely is sort of an advice, a kind of mantra that I try to carry into what we do, what I do. That's definitely the one. Yeah.
Great. I'll remember that one. Have you got a favourite piece of kit? Think particularly of some of the longer races, challenges that you've done. Have you got a favourite piece of kit that you always take?
The pair of shoes, my last Sportiva Helios SRs, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Sportiva runner, but I've worn that pair of shoes for Lakeland, Spotathlon, 24-hour track race, Arc of Attrition, West Island Way, you name it, London Marathon. To me, they're just the most versatile shoe for me as a runner. They're quite a lightweight shoe, but they've allowed me to do almost everything and usually hitch-free. Like I will reach for them. Like if I've got them, I'm happy. Like I do have other shoes that I use sometimes, but they are just, for the last, 5 years, I've probably worn them 95% of the time. So they're the thing I reach for most. In terms of other kit, I'm not big into kit, but probably the shoes, John. Probably the Helios SRs,
Yeah. So the same shoe you can use on the road and off-road and just as comfortable.
Yeah,
wow,
it's wonderful. It's got this little thin carbon plate. It's plastic, actually. We'll call it carbon. In the forefoot only. So the shoe's really flexible and soft and light, but the grooves and the lugs, it just grips enough to, even on races like Arc of Attrition, which is just a sodding wet, boggy mess, it still does a great job. So for me, it's just the ideal shoe,
Yeah. And have they got much cushion to them?
Not a huge amount, but enough. Like I'll get 1,000 Ks easy out of a pair of them before I notice that the cushion's starting to deteriorate. They're pretty bomb-proof, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. Before we come on to question 3, we've got a question here from Paul Mason. He says, we have seen the men's and women's 100-mile records broken in the last 12 months over different formats. What times do you believe we could witness over the next few years for the men's and women's elite in the 100?
Good question. But I mean, the women's will definitely go under 12. I mean, I think Camille is capable of under 12, and certainly when she was slated to come to our track 100 earlier this April, her target was to break 12. I think she'll probably do that on US soil next year. I think Camille's issue is always going to be staying injury free with the amount of load she places on, on her body, just from training volume, but mainly racing volume. She's raced so much. But I think she's sort of getting a hang of it now, and I think that mark could go. The men's is more open because I think there's more contenders capable of bringing that 11, 19 down. Zach definitely feels he can go under 11, and having seen him run many times in person, he looks like he can go sub 11. But I think Alexander, the 24-hour champ, he's capable of probably running around that level. Pat Reagan in the US, he's definitely got a shot at it. So I think within 3 years or so, you'll see sub 11 men and sub 12 women. That's quite a big statement, but I do think both are well within reach. Yeah.
So if a man does sub 11, what average pace is that? Do you know that offhand?
I think Zach was 650s on. Yeah, it's like, I think it's high 630s, John, or maybe 640s. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah.
But it's around there.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's quick.
That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. When you think, if someone did say 10 miles in an hour, that's a really good pace, isn't it? To be able to do that, and it's not that much slower, is it?
The thing that impresses me about Zach is that I've seen him race on the track at Desert Solstice a few times, and it's hot, and he is running hard. And last year he ran, under 640, I think it was, for 100K, and set a new US track record there. And it's just amazing to watch because he never falters. He's like a machine, and the heat didn't seem then to phase him anyway, and to have the ability to power through like that is just phenomenal. He's really worked out how to get the most out of his body. He really is performing at that level now.
Yeah. I think the thing that surprises me when I see people at, say, a 70-mile aid station, and where there's Western States, and they're running in, and these top guys, they look so smooth still. When I think of what I look like after 70 miles, it's a shuffle at best. And these guys, they still seem to be running, don't they? They've got a lovely form.
I think a large part of that is volume for sure, like aerobic base, but they spend so much time on the conditioning aspect of it too. They really look after their bodies. They live for it's almost a job now. So there is a job for some of them. So they're living it. The recovery's right, the nutrition's right, the sleep's right, stress is removed, and they're operating on a completely different level to most of us, for sure. And to watch it is just the best thing. Yeah, I mean, I just love to see people running that well. Just mind blowing.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about our sport as well, isn't it? That we can be on the same course as these guys. You know, further down the field, obviously, but we're on the same course in the same race, aren't we? And I think it's a real privilege, isn't it?
Yeah, and probably as you found with this podcast, you've approached elite runners, and they're just quite happy to just come on and chat, right? And that is just such a breath of fresh air when, you know, the curtains could easily come down and they just say no thanks. But no, they want to share their stories and their journeys and help other runners too most of the time. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it is. It's great. Okay, let's go back to my questions. Question 3, have you got a go-to food in a long ultra? Thinking about the nutrition side, have you got something that you know you can always stomach and helps you?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm a big fan of Goo energy gels, and I would say that between 10 and 15 hours, somewhere in that, I could do a gel-only race that's close to perfect. But in recent years, I started adding in Morton, the 320 energy mix to that, so that my carb intake is much higher. So I try to work, actually in our one community event last week, on the Monday, I did 50 miles out on my 1K block outside the front door and tried to just use Morton and Goos and really increase my carbohydrate intake per hour. And it seems to be working, and I'm quite excited about the prospect of that. That's very sports nutrition focused. Away from sports nutrition, I absolutely love a bit of cheddar cheese in a race. I find that really goes down well. It does nothing for me in terms of performance, but taste-wise, it really helps.
Yeah.
Other than that, I used to be a big fan of Maryland cookies and chocolate, and cherry tomatoes is another one I like to eat. But if I could only pick one nutrition product, it would be a salted caramel goo. Okay. That would be my go-to, yeah.
Excellent. We've got a comment from Colin Anderson. He says, brilliant work with the lockdown podcast, James. Gone too soon. That's the podcast. Marvellous, uplifting drivel.
It's such drivel.
So I think that's a compliment.
That, I don't know. It was so bad. But, you know, people did seem to, at least, it gave them 15 minutes of a breath of fresh air in, you know, probably more difficult times. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, question 4 of mine. If you could only do one more ultra, which one would it be? It might be one that you've not done yet, or one that you'd like to revisit.
I would say I would say Barclay. If I could only do one and I was given a chance to do Barclay again, it would be Barclay. On a more finishable level, although not probably marginally less easy, probably TDG, I would say, is the one that I haven't done that I would love to do before my time. I think that are the Ramsey and the Paddy rounds are the two non-races that would really be, you know, if I could only run once ever again, it would probably be one of the rounds, I think. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We'll give you a few choices there. That's good. And
thanks, John.
Yeah. And the last question I've got is, do you have a mantra to keep you going when things get tough? You mentioned on your advice the one about, in a sense of, you know, to try things. But have you got a particular mantra that helps you?
I haven't got a mantra. If I get in a real groove, I can find myself with the same song on playback in my head, and I try and let that happen. I don't try and force it out. I just keep the rhythm going. I think if your mind's allowed to wander, it's a good sign. So I don't try and fixate on a mantra. Something smooth, if I can think about it, just in terms of, you know, smooth motion and concentrate on running smooth and keeping like a clear head are definitely the things that I would go for, rather than a specific mantra as such. It's funny because I've had some races where I could have finished and gave up mentally, and others where I really shouldn't have finished physically, but mentally I pushed myself all the way. And I do try and tap into those when things are going bad in races. You know, I think to myself, you've been here before, and you know you can get through this. And I think that's probably the thing I lean on heaviest now.
Yeah. Great, that's really good. Enjoy those answers. There's some really helpful there. Well, that's an hour. It's gone very quickly somehow. I just want to thank you so much just for chatting to us. It's really interesting just to get a sense of your own running and what it's like organising the races that you do. And we wish you all the best on those two fronts, for your own running and also for the Centurion races. And we hope that you can get through this difficult time and then be able to pick things up in the future. Oh, got one more question. Is that okay? One last question. That's just come in from Paul Mason. He says, other than heat management, what is the best advice for runners looking to complete the Badwater 135? In brackets, asking for a friend.
Other than heat management, I mean, the thing that got me the most was chafing. I think one thing that happens there is you've got a lot of ice being hung around your neck and your wrists to try and keep your core temperature down. You've got a crew who are spraying you down with, water all the time, dunking your head in ice buckets, dunking water over your head. And before you know it, you've got a massive chafing problem because it dries so quickly. Like if you're soaking wet, within literally half a mile, you're bone dry again, completely bone dry. And the chafing that's left behind is really, really bad. And that really ruined my race. So I would say be super cautious of the chafing side of things. That's a byproduct of the heat management in a way. Yeah.
Is there anything you could have done, do you think, to alleviate that?
Yeah, well, I ended up, this is a different story, but my baggage never made it to Las Vegas. So I bought all my kit for the race in Walmart before the event. So I was wearing a cotton T-shirt. And, I just got it wrong. My kit was just not up to the job. And, we'd ripped up T-shirts to make ice bandanas and things. None of it worked properly. So I ended up just chucking too much water over my head. So in hindsight, yeah, John, there was a lot I could have done. It wasn't all my fault. No. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that'll help Paul as he plans to do Badwater. I'm sure that's...
Yeah, good luck, Paul.
Yeah. Great. Well, once again, thank you so much. And we wish you all the best. And thank you for your time this evening. And all the best with everything you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I loved it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for watching. If you're watching live or you're watching on the catch-up on the YouTube, then nice to have you with us. Okay, so we'll say good night and catch you again. Okay.
See you later. Thanks, John.
Bye.
Bye.